Hey everyone, it's Javi here, and in this video I'm going to walk you through some common practices and questions that you can ask yourself when it comes to designing a user onboarding experience that you can apply to your own projects and designs. If you happen to be new to my channel, welcome! My name is Javi and I make weekly videos about product design skills, principles, and practices to help you build digital products and bring your ideas to life. If that sounds like something that you're interested in, don't forget to hit subscribe. For those of you who've been around for longer, hi, it's been a while. I'm back to action now with lots of good content planned for the next few months, so stay tuned. Now, user onboarding, for those of you who may be unfamiliar with the term, is the process or the area within your product that is going to be in charge mainly of converting guests or visitors into registered users. Now, before we move into Figma and start moving some pixels around together, I want you to take a step back and think about, what do you want your users to get out of your onboarding experience? What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to know? And what do you want them to do? There's going to be a relatively obvious answer to that, which is to have a registered account within your product. But there may be other outcomes worth considering, some of which we're going to see in this video through a real life example that we're going to work on together. Let's go ahead now and switch gears. I'm going to move us into the realm of Figma. And if you've watched me before, you know I love to embrace serendipity when it comes to actually looking at concepts and principles, product principles, actually being hands-on with a project. So as you can see here, I am in this Figma file. I've got a lot of Tailwind-based text styles and color styles loaded up here, which you can find also in the Figma community. I'll drop a link in the description below, so you can start off a file that is similar to this setup. And as you can see, it's going to be a mobile-based project that we're going to work on. So I'm leveraging some community assets here as well. In particular, this status bar for the iPhone X. We are working on top of a I think iPhone X frame, 375 by 812. So I've got here my iPhone X status bar, and I also have the home indicator. So having these elements is going to be very helpful for us, because then we can design, for a real screen with these elements already in place. Now, if you're wondering where I got these are from a fantastic community resource that is designed and maintained by a designer at Twitter whose name is Joey Banks. And as you can see, this is a fantastic resource that's got everything you need to build sort of like native iOS apps and mobile apps in general. So if you ever need to grab like a keyboard or a status bar, which we're actually going to use through our onboarding experience here in this video, you can simply drag and drop them from this amazing resource. So I'll drop a link to this in the description below as well. So if you want to start using it in your own designs and projects, you can do so just by duplicating the file through the community. So the other thing that you see here is a very simple logo that I made for the purpose of this project. It's literally the simplest thing you can imagine. It's like 3 circles here. Actually, yeah, 3 circles, this big one here, and then two that are nested in, as you can see in the layer panel. And we're going to be using it also throughout the onboarding experience too. Now, if we are dealing with a user onboarding experience within a mobile app, which is going to be the case in this video, the first thing that we have to think about is typically going to be a splash screen. Splash screen is that screen that appears on the app while other things are being loaded up in the background, typically some kind of sign in or sign up form. So we're going to be designing like the simplest splash screen in the universe of design, and it's going to be literally a duplicate of this logo. Have a look at what I'm doing here. If you're unfamiliar with the shortcut, I'm holding here the layer. I'm pressing my Option key on the keyboard here, and while I'm pressing it, I'm just dragging it wherever I want. And without letting go of the key, I just let go of the mouse or the touchpad, whatever you may have at home. And you see that it creates a duplicate of the logo. So you can do that pretty much for any layer. I do it all the time, just with like actual frames. Yeah, very useful shortcut. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just place this somewhere around here. think that looks pretty good for our splash screen. I'm gonna just actually call this splash. And the next thing we're gonna do is, duplicate this frame. So I'm gonna do Command C, Command V, and that's going to, very nicely place a frame right next to the one that we're working on with the 40 pixel difference between them. And in this case, what I wanna do is I'm gonna bring the logo up. So, because I wanna fill in some content here, I'm going to reduce the size of this to 32 pixels. And by the way, if you see me moving my head to the side, it's because I have a copy of this file on a separate screen, and it's just handy to have a look at the measurements and so on. Oop, I duplicated that by mistake. So we have here, we're gonna have a 32 pixel sized logo here, and I'm just gonna hold on to my 8 pixel grid or 4 pixel grid and just keep on using these multiples of 4 in order for us to build a consistent spacing between the elements of our UI. So as you can tell, 32 is going to be a multiple of 4, and also as I am adjusting the spacing between the top, the status bar, and the logo, it's also going to be a multiple of 4, in this case 12. As you can see, my constraints are looking good. Center top, that's exactly how I want it. Now that we got ourselves some space on the screen, the next thing that we have to think about is, well, first of all, we're going to rename this frame from splash to welcome. Okay, so this is going to be our welcome screen. And within this area, we're going to be designing for 2 different types of users. Typically, that's going to be the case for any application that you're designing, either for mobile, desktop, doesn't matter. There's always going to be 2 types of users, and that is a user that already has a registered account within your product, and 2, it's going to be a visitor or a guest that does not have a registered account within your product. So within this screen, we have to cater to both of these people, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, decide that the focus of the screen is going to be for people that don't have an account and are therefore likely to be more unfamiliar with the product. So we need to serve them with a bit more attention to hook them into the product and get them to have a registered account, which is going to be the primary focus of our user onboarding experience. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press my T key to start a text layer here. I'm going to put it somewhere around here. And I'm going to say, this is going to be the screen where I want to communicate the main value of my app to the users that are maybe thinking about joining, and I need to tell them basically what they're going to get out of it if they do sign up. So in this case, the purpose of this app is going to be organize and compete in beach volley tournaments. That is going to be the value prop of this app. Okay. So now that we have that in place, I'm going to head over here to my text styles because this might be a little bit too small. And I'm going to go for something like, let's say, text to XL. So we have base here, LG, 2XL. There we go. And I want this to be font bold. So I think that's going to be just fine. Let's also increase the leading a bit. So I have 2 variants here, one with leading 7 and one with leading 8. Leading is just another word for line height, between the lines of your text. So I'm going to stick here to font bold 2432. That looks pretty good, but now it's not going to fit into the screen. So what I'll do is I'm going to drag the left side here a little bit until I get to that multiple of 4, and I'm going to do the same here from the right side. So I'm just going to squeeze in here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's going to be pretty good. Let's for now just center it in the screen with my shortcuts here for alignment, and I'm going to automatically also take care of the constraints, make it left and right and top. So typically this is not going to be much needed within this project because we're going to stick to the same screen and the same dimensions. But if you ever want to then say, okay, I'm going to build a horizontal view of the app when dealing with mobile, maybe mobile web. Or I'm going to design a tablet version that is going to require me to adjust to the responsiveness and width, then the work that you're doing now in terms of the constraints is going to come in quite handy, because as you can see, it's going to adapt accordingly. So why not do it now? Okay, so just to be picky, I'm going to hold on to my styles here and just say this is going to be black. And now I need a pretty decent call to action here to get the user to go through the process of onboarding. And in order to do that, I'm going to use a vibrant button that's going to have the same color as my logo here. So if I head into assets, I already have, as part of this Tailwind package, a button. Otherwise, you can also easily create one yourself, or have a look at the Figma community for lots and lots of assets that people have already built with sort of just common UI elements such as buttons, and just drop one here yourself. So that should be fairly straightforward. I want this to be big and shiny, and I'm also going to make it circular by having a 9999 quarter radius. That sounded like I was saying no in German a lot. And I'm going to hit enter just because I want that roundedness of the logo to also appear across some of the elements of the UI for that sort of nice visual feel. I think that looks pretty good. Now what we want to do is extend both sides of the button all the way to that 20 pixel spacing on the sides, just for that visual consistency. And there we go. That's exactly what I want. Maybe I'm going to change the text here to create account. You can also do something like get started, something like that. I'm just going to be very precise in terms of what the copy is going to be here. And I'm going to hold on to my multiples of 4 as usual. And as you can see, I'm going to move this down to 32. So that's pretty good. Let's change our constraints here to left and right. So we hold on to that, a nice responsiveness. And now instead of this color, I'm going to come over here and remind myself of what this is. This is orange 500, I believe that's the one I may be using. No, I'm using the slightly darker tone, orange 600. So this, by the way, is a very common layout of styles that you can find in most UI kits. They'll typically give you, a wide color palette with different shades of different colors. So orange 600 just means that I am inside the orange palette, and 50 being the lightest, 900 being the darkest. I'm going to be somewhere in between, moving towards darker tones, just so I get that nice contrast in this case with the white background. So I have here my create account. Now that I have these two elements side by side, maybe I want to hold on to both of them. And what I did there is I already had this layer selected. I held my shift key in the keyboard to select both of them. And what I do is I'm going to just drag it to the top here until it's centered horizontally, and have a look at my spacing. It looks pretty good. We can move forward. So I think I've dedicated enough space already and attention to the unregistered users. Now what we have to do in order to finish the screen is think about the people that already have an account. So for those people, what I'm going to do is drop a question at the bottom of the screen that says already a member, and then make sure to have a login link within it. So for this to work, this might be almost, I don't know, you can keep it a text-based, that's fine. I'm going to go down to 14 as sort of my base font size, and I'm going to keep it at font medium 1420. So that is looking pretty good. And now what I want to do is drag it down. Maybe instead of aligning it with respect to the bar here, I'm going to do it with respect to the screen to have that 64 pixel difference, again a multiple of 4. And I'm going to change the whole thing first to black. And then what I want to do, or maybe not black, maybe something a little bit dimmer 700, gray 700, that looks pretty fine. And I'm gonna change the login here. So I'm gonna select the text here inside my text layer, and I'm gonna change this to orange 600, which is, if you'll recall, the same accent color that we use for the button and for the logo. So that looks pretty good. That should give the user plenty of attention in terms of knowing that if they already have an account, they can skip the onboarding experience, which they already done before, and just go straight to their account. So that's gonna be fine. Okay, now I'm gonna make this center bottom. And yeah, that should work. The difference between why I made this left and right and this is center is that in the case of this layer, what you're seeing is that it's going to extend until it reaches the sides of the screen. So you kind of do get a benefit from the width of the text layer itself being responsive. But in this case, because we have such a tiny text, if you actually did left and right, you might have scenarios where, okay, that might make some sense. Hold on here. What did I do wrong? Okay, we have to also change the text alignment within the layer itself, right? So if you're doing left and right. So yeah, this might make sense. But notice that if you do go down lower than 375, here's what's gonna happen to your text. So it might be a little awkward. So what I do instead usually with these tiny, let's put this back into center alignment with respect to the text. What I like to do here as well is just keep it centered rather than left and right. So I know that this is still going to hold if I'm in a larger screen responsiveness or a screen width. But if I'm going down, I'm not going to suffer the issue of the text being like this, like vertically narrowed down to a point where it just becomes unreadable. You could do more work here, such as framing these two elements and having some kind of auto layout so that the button positioning is also going to adapt to the text. That's up to you. In this project, we're just going to focus on this particular screen width. Okay, so now that we have done the welcome screen, let's go ahead and think through the process of what it means to go into a user onboarding within this particular project. First thing that I want to do, and this might be like one of the outcomes. I'm actually going to bring this back into the center. Okay, one of the outcomes of a user onboarding could be not only to just register the user, but to also verify that their identity is real and that they're not just going to be some bot or malicious actor that wants to benefit from having like a very quick and frictionless onboarding, so they can go and sneak into your platform and do bad things. So typically you may want to include some friction in the process in the form of a verification so that you can keep bad people away from entering your product. And that is what we're going to do here. So in the case of mobile, we have the benefit of like the actual device being a channel of verification for user accounts. Let's go ahead and duplicate this frame once again. I'm gonna do my Command C here, Command V, same 40 pixel distance, which is phenomenal. And instead of welcome, I'm going to drop in a question here to remind us of what we want to get out of the screen, which is gonna be, what's your phone number? Okay, so now we're here, we're gonna hold on to this logo here. That's gonna be fine, but on the left side of it, I'm going to include an icon button. And by icon button, I mean I'm going to literally grab an icon. So I'm going to be using hero icons here that are built in into this resource. You can leverage any other library of icons that you want and just import them into your project. What I'm interested in is this left chevron, which is going to be generally used in the case of helping the user navigate an application. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to remove these just so we don't think or we know we're in the right screen. And I'm just going to copy paste it in you see that what I did is I clicked on the frame itself so that when I'm pasting the layer, it knows where it has to be nested in. So that is how this became automatically added there. And yeah, that is looking pretty good. Now what I want to do is I'm going to change the color here, because I don't want the focus to be as intense as with like other text layers. This is more of a secondary action that I'm less likely wanting people to do at this stage. I want them to actually go through. So I'm gonna dim it down to gray 500. And in the case of mobile, you want to keep the touch area of your elements relatively bigger, so that it can fit into a human thumb. The measure that I use typically is just around like 32 pixels minimum. So what I'll do to get that working is I'm not just going to stretch this to 32 because there might be scenarios where maybe I want to actually have some padding around the icon for other purposes. So instead I'm going to do Shift A, and what that will do is it's going to do two things. First thing is that, as you can see in my layer panel, it took the icon frame and it nested it inside another frame called frame 1. I'm going to change this right off to icon button. And yeah, so now we have that, but we have it's still a little bit bigger than what I wanted it to be. It's 40 pixel sizing right now. I want it to go down to 32. So how would I do that? Well, this is an auto layout frame, which means that we have our auto layout properties here. And as you can see, there is this section here called padding around items. And right now that's set to 8. So if I were to change this to 6, you see that it takes away 2 pixels from each side. If it goes down to 5, it's 34. And if we bring it down to 4, now it's 32. Which is exactly what I wanted. We don't really need spacing between items because we don't have another item here. In case you're unfamiliar with auto layout, what this means is that if there were to be another layer inside this frame, this auto layout frame, this is what this means, right? This is this 10 pixel spacing. So no need for this. We're just going to keep it here. I'm going to just bring it down to 0 for the record. You know, for future interactions, maybe I'll want to have like a 6 pixel corner radius, so that you know, in case you want to ever do like some kind of interaction with some kind of like tap state on mobile, you can you know, leverage that padding with a nice border radius. So now we have this in place. What I want to do now is I'm going to bring it to the top. I'm going to align it with the logo. And this is nice because both of these elements are actually the same size. And I'm going to bring it into my 20 pixel spacing with respect to the screen from the left. So that's pretty good. Now what I can do is I can hold my Shift key, grab this element as well, and I'm going to do Command Option G. This is probably the most useful shortcut I'll ever use in Figma. All it does is that it takes anything that you selected and it puts it into a single frame. So I'm gonna call this, let's see, I'm gonna call this top nav, or let's say nav, since there's no other navigation for now. And I'm gonna, holding my command key, because, you know, as you can see, if you weren't holding your command key, it's as if the elements are reacting to its constraints. So this element right here has a center constraint. So as you drag it, it wants to stay centered with respect to its original position, but I want it to actually stay there as I'm resizing. So something that I typically do to resolve that is I hold the command key on the keyboard, and now if I resize, then all the elements will be held in place. So that is super useful. I always keep getting 15 here for some reason. 2, 3, 4, 5. I guess it's because there's some layer here that's yeah, getting me to try to align things that I do not want. So okay, left and right, that's pretty good. Now let's actually get into the copy of the screen. And by the way, we're going to be reusing this top area quite a bit, as you'll see through the process. So I'm glad we got that over with, because we're going to use it later. So first thing we want to do is, well, this is a phone number form. So let's actually go into the UI kit that Joey very kindly prepared for us here. And I already have it selected here. I'm going to hold on to my light theme here to keep things bright in this video. I'm going to Command C this layer. I'm going to come back here to my file, and I'm just going to copy paste it into view. And as you can see, this element itself already has a home indicator, so I can remove this one. I can go here to my constraints, left and right, bottom. And then when it comes to the alignment, I want this to be aligned bottom. So as you can see, the shortcut would be Option S. And if not, you can also come up here to your alignment options and get that done. So, okay, now, you know, people can use their thumbs to put in the number. But what we want to actually do right now is also just like the actual form of the screen. So for that, I need a title. We're going to call that simply phone number. And in order for this to be styled properly, I'm going to head over to my text styles. Maybe in this case, I don't want to have like that 2XL, maybe something smaller. XL will do just fine. Going to keep leading 7. And we're going to go over to semi-bold. So that looks pretty fine. And I'm going to change this to gray 900. So, okay. Now, you know, I always do the same stuff here. Align horizontal center, constrain center, top. And let me just double check here. Yeah, I have a 72 pixel distance with respect to the navigation here. Now that we have this in place and one haircut later, as you can see, we can move on to our next text layer here. And by the way, I also tried to make myself a little bit smaller in the screen because I noticed that I was quite you know, quite out there. And it's my first time recording with this setup, so hopefully I'm a little bit more proportional to what you want to see. So as you can see, I duplicated the text layer here because we want to have a little subtitle where we explain to the user why we want to gather their phone number in the first place. So building up a little bit of trust with this user. I'm not going to want to have this be a text large. Let's apply some visual hierarchy here. I'm going to go down to, let's say in this case, text base, right? And I'm going to keep it at leading 6, and we're going to use a normal, you know, font normal tone. And, you know, going on with this hierarchy, maybe instead of using the gray 900 color that we're reserving for sort of primary typography, we can revert down to gray 500, which we're using for our secondaries. And at this point in time, I can also just, you know, resize a layer to be, you know, sitting accordingly within the screen. So there we go. We can change the constraint now to left and right. And here we can explain, you know, the reason why we're asking for the phone number in the first place. So I would change this to something like your phone number is essential to identify yourself and register for tournaments, right? So the moment that the user realizes that this is a, you know, an essential piece of information that they need in order to be registered within the platform or within the app, then they would be more inclined to give the number rather than just like asking for it without any form of like you know, explanation as to why that is. Now moving on to the next element of our UI, it's going to be the input where the user is going to be able to see their phone number being inserted as it types things down. So for that purpose, I'm going to head over to my exploration file here where I already have everything layered out. And I'm just going to copy paste this component from the Tailwind UI kit. If you're using a UI kit, again, from the Figma community, most likely there's going to be some form of input field component that you can use. Otherwise, it's pretty simple since it is just going to be a frame and it's going to have a white background, gray 300 for the border around it. And in this case, this being a phone number, we want to mock the idea that, let's say, for the convenience of our user, they would be able to tap on the left area here, which by the way has a shadow that we do not need. And they would be able to select the country that defines the prefix number of their phone number value. In this case, I'm going to stick to Spain, and that would be the +34 prefix. So okay, so we have that in place and we're good to go. So as you can see, I'm staying true to my 4-pixel grid, 8-pixel grid principle here. So we have 24 top to bottom and 20 on the sides. That's looking pretty good. And now when it comes to phone numbers, you typically add like a very small, I'd say, disclaimer of sorts. And that would be maybe, let's say, something at around like 16 here for the spacing. And we don't need it to be like this large since it's just like a small piece of info for the user. So we can go with font normal 1216 here and even make it a bit less noticeable since it's far less important information. Just to mention that standard message calls and data rates may apply. So anytime that you're having to deal with or interfere, engage with a courier service, a phone channel where you might have to make use of like SMS messages to validate user IDs and so on, you're going to want to display this just to let the user up front that this is going to be the case as it is expected. So yeah, we have this in place now, and then what I can do is I can just simply add an extra button here. I'm going to just duplicate, as I did with the other elements, this button here. Going to center it 20/20 on the sides, and I'm going to give this a little bit more spacing so it's a bit more differentiated from the rest of the content here. And we're going to call this send verification code. So the way this will work, as I'm sure you're familiar with, whenever you're validating your account through a phone number, is you would allow the user to input their phone number. They're going to get a code generally via SMS. And this is what we're going to tap into right now, right? So the thing here is that we would expect the phone number to be visible until the user can actually send the code. So what I'm going to do is, this is also a nice shortcut to set up, make this button look as if it was disabled until there is a valid phone number that is in the input. What you would do is, you could do multiple things actually. Some people might come here to the color, to the fill, and reduce the opacity of the fill itself, which is one way to go about it. Not the biggest fan, because what that's doing is it's just adjusting the color itself. But what you want to do is take the entire element and make it disabled, right? So if you had other elements, right, so if you were just doing the color, then the text is still, it has the same tone, and that is not quite correct. So what you want to do instead is deal with the opacity of the entire layer. So you can see here it's 100. What I want to do is bring this down to, let's see, what was it here? 50%. So I can come here and insert 50, and now the entire layer has an opacity of 50%. However, if I do Command Z to go back one step, right, I have my 100%. Here's a trick for you. All you gotta do is grab a thumb or a finger in this case, and hit the 5 key on your keyboard, and that will get you opacity of 50%. If you do 4, you get 40, 3, 2, 1, and then 0 is set for 100. I think if you double press 0, you get opacity of 0. I'm going to go back to 5 for 50%. It's a very nice trick that you can use to adjust opacity very quickly. So yeah, now we have our sort of like disabled button, and that should help us move on to the next screen, which is going to be what happens after the user will insert their phone number and tap on send verification code. So at that point, we can, let's just duplicate this screen, Command C, Command V, and I'm going to call this verify phone number, right? So at this stage, we can move rather quicker with the interface itself because we have all the elements that we generally need for an onboarding, which is going to be in this case, just like our top nav, title area, subtitle, some kind of input field, and buttons and keyboard components like this one. So here, all I have to do is change this to verify your number. And then when it comes to the subtitle area here, I'm going to remove this copy and put something appropriate like, please introduce the 4-digit code. Yeah, so we can be quite precise here to help the user actually find this code among maybe like other codes they may have in their SMS app. So please introduce the 4-digit code that has been sent to, and then here we can leverage this our position here to double check that, or to let the user double check that what the phone number they inserted was correct. So if you don't have sort of a verifier here, like maybe you have like 2 input fields, which might be a little odd, like to get the user to like repeat the phone number, maybe you can take advantage of this situation to put something like the actual phone number that was inserted in the previous step. So, and what you can do to make this even more obvious is, let's say you could come in here and change this to, let's see, what was this? This was gray 700, so a little bit darker. And you can even, if you want, make this font medium, so increase the weight of the typography of like this particular text just a little bit so that it is much more noticeable in the screen. So if the user realizes like, oh wait, that's not actually my phone number, then they have the back arrow to go back, reinsert the appropriate phone number again, and then they would be back to this screen. So that is a pretty good touch. And just like before, what I'm going to do is in this case, I'm going to use an input field that does not have that initial dropdown. And then let's see if I can get myself to a proper input component here. I think that's good enough. And now that we have this in place, I can come in here into the copy, remove this prefix, and we can leverage the placeholder text to put something here like introduce code. So you don't generally do this a lot, especially if you have a screen or a page where you have like multiple fields, because you are relying on the user knowing what that input should be about. So typically you would put a little label on the top of the input field. But since we're in an onboarding process where per screen you have like one specific input that has a lot of context around it in terms of this text here, it's not going to be that big of a problem. And it's also going to save us some space. So that's sort of like the logic for how we're dealing with this right now. And in this case, of course, you're not going to need this particular message here, but what you may want to have is a way for the user to resend the 4-digit code in case for whatever reason it doesn't get sent. So I'm going to change this back to text base leading 6 font medium, and we're going to name this resend code. Okay, so that's pretty good, and maybe I want to put this in our common orange 600 at this point. So that looks just fine. Maybe give it a little bit more spacing here, since it's a sort of a different action or user flow than just like going through the normal onboarding. And when it comes to the button, I think this spacing is fine. We can change the copy here to next. I'm going to leave it disabled. since at this point, we are still relying on an input being needed for the user to proceed with the onboarding. So there we go. Now we have this screen. Okay, so let's assume that the phone number gets verified. There is an input that's being inserted, this 4-digit code. Now we can advance into defining other essential information of the onboarding. In this case, now we can verify the user by us knowing like what their phone number is. Maybe we can add one more element here that is going to be the user password, right? So the user has to create a password so that they can get into the app. So they can input, first of all, their phone number, and second of all, the password. And by the way, like I'm using phone number here because first of all, it's good to have so you can verify like the ID in that way. But also I do conceive the phone number as a more appropriate choice, like default choice for users to find each other within the app, since this should be like an experience for this particular app between friends that already know each other's phone numbers and they can find each other in that way. But alternatively, if you're working on a different kind of app with different kinds of needs, then you may want to use email instead, right? So instead of asking for phone number first, you ask for email, verify via email. It's the same process, you're just using a different channel of verification. But the password part remains the same. So I'm going to change this to create a password, right? So same process as before. I'm not sure if at this point we would need this arrow here, since going back wouldn't make a lot of sense. I'm divided on this, right? Because if I were to actually close the app and come back, I would expect the user to probably land already in the create a password page if possible, but I don't have strong feelings about it. So let's just leave it as it is. Maybe just change this to create your password, and then again, leverage whatever styles or text layer you have, if you do have one. In this case, where you're asking for sensitive information, why tell a user why you need this info in the first place. So and in the case of the password, actually even better, make sure that there is enough strength in the password so that it's like fairly secure. So just as a little recommendation, we could say make sure it's got at least 8 characters and a number, for example. That would be good enough. We can see we're in font medium because it's inheriting the last style here. We don't want that, so I'm gonna change this back to font normal, keep it 24 here on the top for the padding. And in this case, we want to have a version of our input field where there's going to be an icon on the right side, because we're going to want to let the user, in this case, tap to view that the password they inserted is the one that they wanted. So you can go about this 2 or 3 ways. You can either have 2 inputs, one way where you insert the password and then you ask to reinsert the password just to make sure that the user inputted the right text in place, or you can have this version where you just have one input and then you have, let's see, this would be called eye icon. Yeah, there we go. And I have to come in here and play a bit with the styles that are not that properly configured. There we go. Or you can have this, and this way, let's say you had like some text here, it would be by default hidden or encrypted as a password. But if the user taps into the eye, then they would be able to see the password that's in place. Might be a little bit less secure because there might be people around, and if you were looking at the password, then like everybody could look at it. But just small things to keep in mind when designing these kinds of things. But for my purpose, for the purpose of this app, I'm feeling pretty good about this. Password should be fine as our placeholder text. We don't need this layer here, and we do need to change actually the keyboard. So no longer numerical. I'm going to go here to my Figma UI kit for iOS 15. And I'm going to pick, let's say this one right here. And this is red, by the way, because there is a layout grid that is on top. It's not that the keys are actually red, it's that the default here sort of is showing me this layout grid. So copy paste this, head over to my app, click on the frame, Command V, and let's see cookie points, if you remember what the shortcut for the bottom is. If I'll recall correctly, it's Option S. There we go. And for center, that's going to be Option H. So Option S, Option H, and then head over to my constraints here, bottom, left, and right. All right, that looks pretty good. So let's see. The next thing that we need here is, well, first of all, I'm going to bring this to be on 24 pixels padding with or spacing with respect to the input. And we do need one more thing here. You can put this either on top or below of the next button. And that is going to be a confirmation for the user that they agree, that they have read and agree with your terms of service and privacy policy. This is standard practice for onboarding users into a sort of like online digital application. So you need to have those documents in place, and you need to, whenever you get to the step where after whatever the user does, then there is an account that's being created. So after this step, officially you have the registered user, then you want to make sure that you are asking this before that happens. So we're going to do it here, right? So I'm going to put it below the button just so it's obvious that there needs to be like a confirmation done before they can move forward. So it sort of serves as like a friction here. And I'm just going to grab it from here since it's a very simple component. I'm going to copy paste it here and then show you what I did. So this is going to be, I think I kept it at 24. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And all this is an auto layout frame, right? So you have two inner frames. So if we're looking at our layer structure here, there's one text layer here with terms of service and privacy policy with a little bit more weight in the same way that we did for the phone number. And we're still using our orange 600. And you can see that on the left side, we have a checkbox component that was available through the UI kit that I have. And what I did is I wrapped it inside a frame here called checkbox. Now, why did I do that? And why this, right? So I did it because, have a look. This text layer, if you look at the text itself, this has a leading of 20, right? So if I remove the style here and I look at the line height, it says 20. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that the checkbox would be aligned with the first line of text. Now, that wouldn't be possible. Let's say if I remove the frame, which I can do with a shortcut, Command-Shift-G. As you can see, because we have auto layout in place, and if I take a step back, you can see that because we have this alignment of top left, you can see that it is not being aligned because the checkbox is only 16 pixels height. So what I did in order to fix this is going a few steps back, I did, or we can just actually do it now. I can do Command-Option-G to wrap this into a frame. And that gives us more flexibility in terms of defining that 20 pixel height and then centering this with respect to that frame. So that's what's going to give us that effect, and those extra 2 pixels on the top, that's going to get us our perfect alignment. So that is exactly how we got to this point. And at this stage, we have everything we need for our create password screen. Pretty good. So far, we got the user to verify themselves with the phone number, so we avoid any malicious actors. And we also get them to actually finalize their account creation by setting up a password that has some minimum level of strength for security purposes. We let them check that the password they inserted is the correct one, and we get them also to read and agree to the app's terms of service and privacy policy, which is an essential need for a user onboarding. So beyond this stage, you could say that you've reached your goal of getting the user to create an account for your product. So beyond this, there's going to be a new account in your user database that shows that, hey, there's a new member that joined at this point in time. This is their phone number, and that's it, right? Because you wouldn't actually know their password, but you know that they did it because there's an account that got created. So that is pretty good. So at this stage, everything else you do is a complementary outcome that you want to get from your onboarding. In this case, what I want is to get them a little bit more engaged in the app profile fill out, right? I want them to add a little bit more of character, ask for some very small things that can go a very long way in terms of making them feel at home in the app. And what I'm going to do for that purpose is ask for 3 things. And then we're going to do one more thing at the end. But those 3 things are going to be, first of all, tell me what your name is, which is going to be a nice piece of information that's going to play well with how the app will work in the future. Second thing is add a profile picture, since we're going to rely on that as a visual cue to identify people within the platform once they, in this case, play some matches, join tournaments. Maybe they want to follow their friends to see what kind of matches they're playing and against what people. And the third thing is to make the matching of matches more specific and more appropriate. We're going to ask them, in this case, if it's just going to be, in this case, a service for Spaniards as sort of my initial go-to-market. I will ask them for what province they live in, right? What location are they based in, so I can recommend them, so the app can recommend them appropriate tournaments and things that they can attend. You could use the native location functionality that Apple has through the phone. But I think if we just have a drop down with the provinces, that would be enough. And also it's a bit less personal than having to actually ask for permission to access location information through the device. So I'm going to stick to that simplicity for this video. So, okay, we have all the elements we need, right, as I mentioned. So what we would need here is, and we can move through this rather quicker. So what's your name, right? And at this point, I can definitely get rid of this left arrow here, since now I definitely do not expect the user to go back. And if they were to close the app and come back in, I would recognize there's already an account in place they can log in with, and they would come into this screen. So instead of create your password, we can say, what's your name? And then, I can actually just start grabbing a few things from here to make the process a bit easier for us in this video. So again, using the text layer here to add a little bit more info. So include your full name to make it easier to recognize you in tournaments. So we are using the layer itself and this screen to explain to the user why providing us with their name is going to be a good idea. It's going to be helpful to identify them within the dynamic of the app and how the app works. So we're going to do that. And now I'm going to keep the input very simple. No need for an icon. And I can even get rid of the placeholder text. So just change that to empty, since it would be quite obvious. And I'm going to move the button. I don't need this anymore. And I think, yeah, the button is going to be 80 pixels down here. So that's going to be fine. I could leave it where it was, honestly, in case, we want to have that consistency. But if you do get the buttons a bit lower in the screen, they might be also more accessible via the thumb, right? So always keep that in mind. You have this sort of area here that goes from here to there sort of as a curve. that is going to be the available and easy access, easy reach of a thumb. So if I put this here, it might be a little bit easier to reach and move forward with if the user is holding the phone with one hand. So that is pretty good. Now we can move on to the next screen, which is, as I mentioned, asking for location. We can say, where do you live? And here I could bring back the arrow in case they, for some reason, want to change their name or put the wrong thing. And here we can change the text. And here I'm just going to grab the copy again. So please specify the province that you live in to recommend you nearby tournaments. And in this case, I'm using a different component here. So as you can see, it's not a normal input. It's going to be actually a select component. So this typically in UI kits is a different kind of component. It may look like an input field because it has the same form and shape, but how it behaves differently is that this would open up a list, a drop down with a bunch of options. And what you need to differentiate this from an input is to have some kind of icon that would make it obvious that there's going to be a list that's going to appear when you click on this, right? So that's going to be the case for this component right here. And we don't need the keyboard anymore. So that's done. So in this case, I'm going to bring back this normal home indicator. I'm going to click on the frame, paste. So now that's pretty good. And in this case, we will have a default for the dropdown, which in this case, I would just put like Alicante, that's a province in Spain. So this doesn't have to be disabled anymore because that might just be the option that users select. And I'm going to have the button all the way down to make it as easy as possible to be interacted with. And I'm just going to change the constraint to bottom. So that's looking pretty good. So yeah, now we have this in place. We have our location ask. And then the last thing that I'm going to encourage users to do is going to be to pick a profile picture, to upload a profile picture to their profile so that they are more recognizable when they play tournaments or they play with their friends, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to duplicate the frame here with my Command-C, Command-V shortcut. And I'm going to say, pick a profile picture. Maybe at this point, well, I'm going to leave this here. Why not? And then for the copy, this is what I wrote. So give your profile some character and upload a photo to recognize you better. So that's the reason why I'm asking for profile pictures. I'm going to remove this. And then here I can just show you what I did. This is actually the avatar component in Tailwind UI. In most UI kits, again, you will have an avatar component you can leverage. So I'm going to copy paste this. And then how do you actually, and then let's see, let me double check. Yeah, this is the right placement. How do you actually get the user to upload the picture? You may just have this and expect that they might tap into the avatar knowing that this is how you upload a picture. Sometimes you'll have like a little overlay with the camera icon, which is fine. But then once the picture gets uploaded, it's still in the way. So I do like this style where there is also an add button that is going to be, and by the way, we can change this to profile picture. Yeah, this is going to be sort of overlaying, but on the bottom right, so it won't be like in between the user and the picture that gets uploaded, which is kind of nice. It has its orange accent, which makes it very visible. And then the choice of color and border here is relatively smart because, first of all, it differentiates the button from the rest of the interface. But then in case the profile picture has a white background, then you're still going to have this gray 300, I think it is, gray 200, stroke for this component here. That's going to help differentiate the picture from the button element. So that's the logic for how this is going to work. And in the case of the action here, whenever you are going to be involving the user in doing like a little bit more effort than usual, so it's not just like inputting, but you may be asking them for like a picture, which they might have to take in the moment or browse through their picture library. They may not have the picture they want. They may want to upload it later. It's always a good idea to have a secondary action that is something like I'll do it later, right? So it gives the user a choice of, because this is not essential information for the profile to move forward, then you can always provide this option to speed up the onboarding if that's what the user wants. They want the fast onboarding. Then you can have them tap on I'll do it later. Otherwise, maybe I would just dim this one and just let them upload the picture, and then they'll be good to go. So for the next screen, I'm just going to copy paste this one because it does require a bit more work, and I'll show you again what I did. So what I did here is I grabbed the dark mode version of the top nav and the home indicator here. So that's one thing. Then the frame itself has a black background, and here are just simply two text layers. One is it's font medium to make it a bit more out there compared to the other text, which is cancel. So I'm encouraging more that once you upload the picture, you actually apply the changes, which in this case would be the cropping. So how did I actually make this cropping work? Well, there are actually two images here. So not just one, but two. And if I grab the background, this is just going to be that normal image that has, again, using my keyboard shortcut here for 5, a layer opacity of 50%. And right on top of that, there is another layer that is that image cropped, and it has this white stroke of 2. So if you combine these two in this view right here, that is sort of the result you get. It mimics like the idea of a user sort of playing around with the size of a picture to get it within the cropped area for their profile picture. So that is quite a nice touch if you want to be prototyping this. And then once you have this in place, theoretically, you would go back to this profile picture screen with the avatar replaced for the image. So let's assume that's going to happen. And then the user would tap on next. Either that, or you can just assume that the user would hit apply and then move on to the next step. So if we now take a step back and think about all the outcomes that we wanted so far for our onboarding experience, there's sort of like 2, right? Or 3. First of all, we wanted them to know what the app is about. So we told them like, hey, you're going to be joining this app so you can organize and compete in beach volley tournaments. We get them to create their account, and we do that by, first of all, getting a verifiable account channel, which in this case is going to be the user's phone number. We're leveraging the device that the user is in right now to verify their account. And then in order for the account to be created, we are asking them for a password that's going to be associated to the authentication process of that account. And this includes the process of agreeing and reading terms of service and privacy policy. Then we are getting to our next outcome, which is to get them a bit more involved in the app dynamics and give some character to their profile. So asking for small things, but nevertheless important things, like asking for their name, asking them where they live with a simple drop down here, a select component where they can pick from a list of provinces where they live. And then at the end, optionally asking for a profile picture, which they can crop to get to the right sizing. So that is it. And there is just one more outcome that I'm just gonna show you right here. And that is, it's a common one for onboarding processes. And that is to ask the user whether they want to enable notifications, because remember, this is not a default. You need to ask for permissions to the user's device, to the user to get notifications enabled. So typically you will see some apps that have this as part of the onboarding process to make it, get that permission in as soon as possible. And so all I did here is I reused the logo, I reused the text styles to get this in place. And it's as simple as, well, here I used the text layer to specify why they may want to turn on notifications. And here you can see it's like, keep up with relevant activity from your tournaments and matches. So this is like the primary value prop of enabling your notifications. And you can see at the very bottom, very sort of touch-friendly placement, enable notifications. You would expect that after tapping on this button, there would be that sort of native modal in the middle that's, is asking the user, like, do you want to move forward with like enabling permission, like notifications for this app? But because this is optional, again, in the same way as the profile picture, then that is why we also need a secondary action that is going to be, I'll do it later, right? So this is basically saying like, no, but I may be open to it later once I realize there is value in enabling notifications. And this will typically be somewhere in the user settings of the app, right? So they can always turn that on and off as needed or as desired. And in this case, the button can be enabled because we don't rely on any input. And these, by the way, are also, it's the same button, right? So it's not just a text layer. It's actually the same button, but I changed the background color to white and also the text to orange 600. So that is pretty much it. I hope that this video was useful to you and you learned a couple of skills, principles, or practices to help you design and build an onboarding experience for your users. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up down below. And if you want to stay tuned to more videos, please subscribe to my channel because there's a lot more to come. We're going to be looking at a lot more product areas that are involved in terms of building, designing digital products. So yeah, really looking forward to that. And I hope to see you again in another video. I hope you're well and I'll catch you in the next one.